Hi, this is Misha, and now it's time to look at Earth Spacedock, also known as Starbase 1 or 001. This is the giant mushroom in geosynchronous orbit of Earth, Sol System, Sector 001. And of course, this is the recently released Eaglemoss model of the Spacedock. There have been a few others over the years, but not a whole lot. This first appeared in Star Trek 3, along with other famous models like the Excelsior and Oberth class, and of course the Klingon Bird of Prey. That movie was pretty heavy when it came to new models for Star Trek finally. In universe, construction began around 2255, 2256. It was underway by 2257 and seems to have been completed sometime between 2275 and 2280. Like I said, it was fully operational and also had been constructing, or at least heavily working with, the Excelsior by the time Enterprise came back in 2285 at the beginning of The Search for Spock, the third film. I think an underrated film. I really enjoyed it. I know it's kind of a divisive film in the Star Trek fandom, but from the first time I saw it in the 80s, I enjoyed it. Especially the beginning. It had a really good beginning, I thought. The first half hour, 45 minutes, had a really good balance, a really good tone after Wrath of Khan. A little bit of humor, but still relatively serious, and some good acting from DeForest Kelley, and even Sulu got his moment now and again. So anyway, this thing is about 3 miles tall, quite large. I do not know how many decks. Probably deck-wise it's hard to count because there's a lot of hollow space. It has 8 berths for large cruiser-type ships, such as the Enterprise and Excelsior. It can support up to 24 smaller ships, like, for example, an Oberth. It had a crew of roughly 318,000. Of course, this would fluctuate. It was a military installation, but it also had quite a few facilities for commerce and trading. Had an engineering staff of over 1,000. Also, it was used for cadets at Starfleet. They would at least do a semester or two on board Spacedock because pretty much everything was going. If they were engineers, they could learn engineering. If they were security, there was more than enough security going on. They could learn about starships because always some were docked. So it also kind of doubled as a part of the university campus in a way. It was in low Earth orbit, just above the Van Allen radiation belt, to keep it from collapsing in on Earth. It had quite powerful impulse drives at the bottom. Obviously no warp, but it did have impulse for station keeping. And this is common. Even the current International Space Station has thrusters, because the orbits will deteriorate. It had also very powerful sensors. You can see the antennae on the top here. It said that anything over about 1 meter within the solar system could be detected. It had 40 mounts for heavy phasers, but because of politics, they were never installed. However, the equipment for them was kept on board, and the engineers were kept ready to install them, and it said that they could have the facility up and militarized in under a week. And I bet probably even less than that, but it's worth noting that in Best of Both Worlds, as the Borg cube approached Earth, they had a few days' notice, and yet Spacedock was not a combatant. So obviously they needed more time than a few days to get it ready to go. So basically it was defensive. Of course it had the sensors and the shields, and of course it usually had a starship or 2 or 3 or whatever. It also had construction facilities. Like I said, it took part in manufacturing the Excelsior. We also know by 2370 it was manufacturing ships such as the Sabre class. Most likely the Defiant could have been manufactured here, or at least assembled or final tested. We know that it was in service well into the 24th century. It was seen on screen as late as 2393, and no reason to think that it would have not have served on and on. This station was continually enlarged and upgraded. Originally it wasn't this full mushroom shape. They actually added on sections as time went on to make it bigger and support larger ships. For example, they put on larger bay doors as ships got bigger and bigger over time. So think of it more as a city than you would a ship. You know, ships have a service life and then they're decommissioned, but cities aren't decommissioned. They're just enlarged and improved and basically renewed. I mean, you know, London, Rome, Moscow, Tokyo are very old cities and, of course, very still modern. So Spacedock was basically a city in space, or Starbase 1, like I said, if you wish. It was a central hub. I mean, it wasn't the seat of governance. That was partially in San Francisco and elsewhere, but it was a primary military facility and trading facility. It was the largest orbiting space station in the Federation. They had larger space structures, but it was the largest orbiting. And it had a lot of history and essentially nostalgia for Starfleet. Like I said, every cadet served on it after it was fully operational. So, yeah, Earth Spacedock. And it's a very iconic part of the Star Trek universe ever since it was introduced in the movies. It was really only the second space station we saw, with the first being KE-7, which, yes, I'll get around to reviewing eventually. And like the K-7 station in the Eaglemoss collection, this is considered a special edition. I did a video a bit ago looking at a regular, a special, and a jumbo or XL edition of the NX-01, and kind of talked about the size differences. I'm happy that they did their space stations in the special line and not the regular, because as a special this looks pretty good. It's actually quite long. I'm going to say, counting the antenna, we're probably 9 inches, but of course there's not a lot of width to it, and it's a pretty symmetrical and relatively simple shape, but it has plenty of detail. Mine came in quite nice. The antenna on top are straight. The antenna on the bottom are also nice. I'm actually pretty pleased with it. Now this is mostly polymer. I actually expect it to be a little more metal, but they mostly went polymer, which is okay. The metal is just this kind of second tier down here, where the stand rest, the top part, and the bottom are polymer, although I suspect there's probably a metal core to kind of hold it all together for stability. So it's relatively light. I mean, it's got some decent weight to it, but it's relatively light. But again, the size is neat, and it's just such an iconic part of the universe. I know some in the community of the Eaglemoss collecting were really, really wanting Eaglemoss to do this, and I can't be honest with you and say that I was one of those. I was just like, hey, Spacedock. But I pre-ordered it when it came up. Why not? Hadn't actually bought many ships and things lately, so it seemed like it was a good time. But I'm happy they did it. I mean, they did K7, so they might as well do this. There aren't that many space stations in the Star Trek universe. And that's about it. This is a central location, a central hub in Star Trek Online, where a lot of people probably know it from. It's appeared mostly in the films. It was in all 4 films after Wrath of Khan, so 2 it was not in, but 3, Search for Spock it was in, 4, Voyage Home it was in, 5, Final Frontier, 6, Undiscovered Country. This model was also featured in Next Generation, although it was representing a different starbase. It was still this style, this class. I've heard the class sometimes referred to as Safe Haven class, but that's not canon, of course. Kind of hard to have a class for a city in space. I mean, you'd think each one would be pretty darn unique. But it does seem like this was a somewhat common design throughout the Federation, at least for larger starbase needs. And it also appeared in Voyager. And as I said, it appeared most recently in Discovery at the end of Season 1, at least under construction, which is neat, I think. Now, if they can get more into actually obeying canon, that'll be awesome. Anyway, I digress. The Starbase 1 Earth Spacedock Special Edition from Eaglemoss. Pretty neat, and mine came in good shape and came in on time. I will say one thing about their pre-orders. They're really good about getting them out when they say. If they say something's due in January, they usually ship it within the first couple of days, maybe first week of that month. So, gotta give them credit. You know, a lot of places when you do pre-orders, you're only hoping they come in within the whatever time period, and usually they don't. But Eaglemoss seems to have it down pretty good. Any questions or comments, do please post them below. Feel free to share your own thoughts. That'd be neat. And if you haven't, you might check out some of my other videos. I do appreciate you tuning in. This is Misha, and I will catch you very soon next time. I promise we're only using thrusters.